Namaste. Welcome to our 64th talk on the Bhagavad Gita. We are at the very end of the 13th chapter, the last two verses. As the sun alone illumines this entire world, so the Lord of the field, of course, this is Iswara, illumines the entire field. Now, all that lives is the life of Iswara. All that appears to be inanimate is also an idea held in the mind of Iswara. There is the prakriti, the energy, but that's just shaped accordingly. As Iswara thinks, or we say imagines or dreams, so it is that it appears. And it is the consciousness of Iswara in you and I, united with ourself, which is essentially conscious and essentially consciousness, that produces this. That faculty of consciousness or quality is eternal in us, but only when it is united with the Ishwaric consciousness do we experience something objective, something outside of ourselves, different from ourselves. So all the world is illumined, is actually living and moving by the power, by the will, by the thought of Ishwara, God, the personal God. Brahman, beyond even all that, is of course impersonal. Those who know through the eye of knowledge, that's the inner eye. Those who do not cultivate the inner eye cannot have the eye of knowledge. And only one thing really cultivates that eye. There's reasoning, there's philosophizing, are not without value. But the one thing that directly opens that eye of knowledge is meditation, practice of meditation. That and that alone is the whole power behind awakening. So only the yogi is on the path to this. The philosopher is not. The philosopher is very clever. The philosopher can speak what is wisdom, but real knowing, direct perception of the reality, that is only done through the full awakening of our whole inner mechanism, which is actually, you might say, an enlightenment machine. Even the body is part of the enlightenment machine. When that's enlivened, awakened, and directed correctly, like you can have the best telescope in the world, but if you have it turned off to the side, you'll never see what's going up in the vast expanse of the heavens. So those who through the eye of knowledge know the distinction between the field and the knower of the field, who really know, I am not that, I am this. I am not what is around me, I am only that which is within. And the very core of my being, that is the essential reality. Even my mind, even my thoughts, my will, they're external to me. It's the principle of consciousness that is inside. So those who know through the eye of knowledge by their own experience, in other words, the yogi, the adept practicing yogi, they sees the distinction between the field and the knower of the field and the liberation of beings from prakriti, because that's the only value of knowing the field. In other words, what's the use of seeing a lock if you can't unlock it? And you can't open the door and then be free. So they go to the Supreme. They don't just stay here in the world and talk about the Supreme and think about the Supreme and pray to the Supreme, which is a great trap of religion. They go there, out of this place. They go home. We used to sing in the Protestant church, though we didn't know what we were saying, I'm going home to die no more. In other words, there's only way for there to be no more death is for there to be no more birth. So we're going home to transcend that process. There. All right. Now we're ready for chapter 14, the yoga of the division of the three gunas, the three qualities, the three modes of manifestation, appearance, and behavior of the energies of the world around us and within us, both the seen and the unseen power and energy. So Sri Krishna continues. Again, I shall explain to you the highest of knowledges, the best of all knowledge, because it gains us the best thing there is, the summum bonum, the highest attainment of life, which is ascent into the divine consciousness itself, having known which all the sages attained to the highest perfection. They knew it was possible, and that alone wouldn't do it, but they found out what made it possible, and that was, you won't be surprised, yoga, of course, and the practice, sadhana itself. Resorting to this knowledge, because it's there waiting us, is like a room. We don't have to create it. We don't have to imagine it. We just walk through the door into that room, and there we are, and we see it, and we see the all of it, and we live in it, and we experience it. So, resorting to this knowledge, they attain identity with me, because the goal of yoga is the divine, the absolute, the Parama Chaitanya, the Param Purusha itself. At creation, they are not born because they're out of the game. Let's say that you took a road and a boat on a lake and you felt a little seasick from it. Well, when you get out of the boat or on the shore, well, then you're standing there firm. That boat can rock all at once or turn around all at once. You won't get the least bit seasick because you're not in it. So then, at creation, they are not born, nor do they tremble at its dissolving. You see, in some of the higher worlds, when the Pralaya comes, especially what's called the Mahapralaya, wherein all the worlds, from the material world, even through the subtlest causal world, disappears. It starts at the bottom as it's sort of like the old-fashioned window shade that rolled up. So it sort of rolls up. And as it's approaching, people feel disturbed because you see, in those worlds, there is no pain, there is no suffering, there's no anxiety, you can't get hungry, you never have to sleep. So you have no needs as such whatsoever. Metaphysically, you do, spiritually, but externally, you don't. So, and there are like more worlds that can be numbered. When you think how many germs can just live, let's say, on the tip of my finger, well, think how many worlds can be in the astral worlds. And they're beautiful beyond description. And our experience of them is far, far more vivid and far more absorbing than what we experience down here. So we could take 80 billion years just looking at all kinds of worlds and traveling through them all and seeing their qualities, because they also are learning stations. And but that would be too long to go into. But anyway, so they are. So why should we leave? Why should we get out? Why not just? And we can spend creation cycles up in those worlds as tourists. And also, there's all kinds of people there along with us, and some of them are very interesting. Some of the great figures of history are there. Some people are greatly creative. You see, artists down here, they have to have an instrument, they have to write down on notes, they make the music, or they take a material they sculpted, or they painted. Out there, a true great artist can just sit there with a whole crowd around him and just in his mind create beautiful things to see, beautiful forms, beautiful sounds, beautiful music. Everything is mind born, it comes out of the mind. So you can entertain yourself for billions and billions and billions of years. So then how will you ever get stirred up? Because you think, well, if down here you can be so smart, figuring out the ills of samsara and so on, uh, why don't you retain it? Well, it's because you happen to know you've left it far, 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 far behind, and you don't have to worry about it. And you can just fiddle around and enjoy it, which is the way it should be, because until you understand none of this is me, these experiences aren't me, all the people I meet who talk to me, all the things I admire, they ultimately aren't even real. I'm what's real. Now, in those people too, they're real. There's also a real self in them, but I can't do anything about that or with that. And so there needs to be the awakening. Why don't I get beyond all this dream? It may not be a nightmare, it may always be nice and seemingly perfect, but that's not me. When will I have the wisdom to go home? How many people can wake up to that? Virtually none, because we're under the hypnosis of the enjoyment. Therefore, as these worlds begin to dissolve, they begin sort of shaking. Think of kind of there being an earthquake. It's more psychological, but and the closer the dissolution and the dissolving forces come, then suddenly, well, we're all unsettled and we realize, whoops, I'm going. Well, let me get beyond it. And so we keep going higher and higher and higher in hopes we can get beyond it. Most people don't. So even the world they're in is dissolved, and they just go into a kind of pure consciousness, like dreamless sleep. And then when it's time to begin, well, it all happens over and over. And there are people who fool their lifetimes, many lifetimes away, just like that. This is sad, but it's true. But those who have entered into that real knowing, they don't tremble. They don't tremble at the approach of physical death, and they don't tremble at that dissolution, because they know they will not be dissolved. They'll say, "Whoops! I better step off of this elevator before it crashes to the basement and kills everybody," and we step out. Then there's no coming or going. As to what is there, there's no language for it, because all of our language is for lower material, either gross or subtle material experience and appearances, especially. All right. For me, great Brahma is the womb, because Krishna is speaking as the absolute, the Param Brahman, beyond all these things. So Brahma, but the great Brahma, there are many different Brahmas. In fact, there's a story that Krishna was one time in the palace, and sort of you might call doorkeeper of the palace came and said, Brahma is here to see you, because in higher times and in areas of higher consciousness, as it was around Krishna, gods could just come and go and appear and manifest it easily. So he said, Brahma is here to see you. Krishna said, which one? So the doorkeeper went back and says, well, Sri Krishna says, which Brahma? Well, Brahma was astounded. He said, what are you talking about? There's only one Brahma. It's me. He said, really? Well, what one? Okay, I see. You're the five-faced Brahma. And he thinks, well, yes, of course I am. Because you see, Brahma has in front, behind, to the right, and the left, and the top of his head, faces. This has symbolism, but everything in the world is embodying a kind of symbol and a kind of message. We don't want to go any further there. So anyway, he came back and said, well, it's the five-faced Brahma. So Krishna went to see him, and Brahma said, what are you talking about, the various Brahmas? Krishna said, well, there are many Brahmas. You have five faces. There's seven-faced Brahmas, nine-faced Brahmas, eight-faced Brahmas, 12-faced Brahmas. And he said, well, I don't believe it. Krishna said, all right, touched him on the head, and boom, he saw it all. And he saw there were infinite number of Brahmas and an infinite number of faces. You see, according to the number of faces the Brahma has, that's how many basic elements there are. So we have 5 elements. We have 5 instruments of perception. We have 5 limbs to our body, 5 fingers, 5 toes. But if it was, say, the 10-faced Brahma, we'd have 10 senses, 10 fingers, 10 toes, and all this multiplied. Now, we can hardly imagine, we hardly get to the so-called, that we talk about the 6th sense, we hardly get to the 4th sense, the sense of time. So just think, more than twice the sensory expression we have and experience is possible. But that means double the time to get entangled. And people usually cannot get disentangled. You'll read in the Indian scriptures, and it's not chauvinism for the human form, the gods pray to be born on earth. Why? Because it's so miserable, it's such a muck hole, really, ultimately, and so filled with the possibilities of suffering that the intelligent, awakening being says, let me get out of here. I want to get out. But then how does he get out? He has to, with all his might, all his soul, all his will, he wants to get out. Then the time comes where someone comes and says, I'll show you the way out. And the way out is an inner way out. And this is how you can do it. This is very important. There are, as I say, higher worlds, tapalokas, where that's all the people do is practice sadhana. Now that's the kind of world you and I want to go to. And if we are absolutely faithful yogis and we put in the time and we put our awareness where it should be, we will go there. Okay. For me, great Brahma is the womb, and that I place the seed. The origination of all beings comes from that. In other words, there is a little anu, an atom, and it evolves, it grows, expands, and it is the whole thing around creation. And then the seed souls, we might say, or seed spirits, spirit selves, then they are put in. And first they're united with atoms. You and I have we started out as an atom of hydrogen. And we became more and more complex atomic particles. Became we were just a particle. Then we were part of a whole atom. Then we inhabited a whole atom. And so on until we got here. The journey you and I have taken to be sitting here right now is inconceivable. The time span is inconceivable. That's why we must not waste it. Human birth is something extremely valuable, and part of it being this stirring up process. And it also means we can be objective enough to comprehend such teachings as this. Whatever be the forms produced within all wombs, great Brahma is their womb. In other words, everything is born from that primal womb, and I, the seed casting Father. Now, then, we're going to talk about the gunas. No, we'll talk about that next. I see the time went away very quickly. Therefore, to be continued in our next encounter. Namaste. Namaste.